Hello and welcome to Divi Coaching. Although Divi is an extremely powerful theme, sometimes you can't achieve everything that you want simply by using the built-in settings, and you do need to apply some custom CSS. This CSS can be added to Divi in various different places, and today we're going to have a look at each of those in turn and show what the differences are, how you can add the CSS, and how it will affect your site. Okay, without any further ado, let's start having a look at custom CSS in Divi. The first thing we're going to look at is how you can add CSS in the various settings areas within Divi. Now, these areas are available in each section. They're available in each row. Within the row, they're available in each column. And within the column, in each module, you have settings available in each module as well. So I have a simple single section, a 3-column grid, and in the first of these columns, I've put a single text module. Now, let's start off with the settings in the text module. And if we go to the Advanced tab, you will immediately see that there are two options that talk about CSS, the CSS ID and classes, which we're going to come back to later, and the custom CSS area. So if we scroll down to the custom CSS, this then is broken down into 3 areas: before, main element, and after. Now this will vary depending on which module you're using and where you're looking to apply the CSS. The before and after are there in each case, and these apply to before and after pseudo elements. Now I'm not going to go into great detail on these. If you want to find more about that, just Google pseudo elements before and after. Essentially, it's content that can be put in before and after the actual module that we're working with. We're going to focus on this main element, and what you will find, and you may have found this before, is that if you add something like, say, color red in here, it will actually change the color of the text in this module to red. So we need to understand a little bit about how that's working, and if you have a look on the screen now, you will see the CSS that's being generated when we type color red into here. So there are 2 parts to every CSS statement. There is the first part, which is called the selector, which is at the top here, this etpb text underscore 0 and then p. Then there are a pair of curly braces, and inside those curly braces would be a list of attributes. So in this case, color and the value for that attribute, and in this case red. So this is the CSS that's actually being generated by typing color red into this main element area. So how do I know that that's the CSS that's being generated? Well, if we go next to where it says main element, there's a little question mark, and if we hover on that question mark, it will come up saying CSS added here will target the following class: .et underscore pb underscore text underscore 0. Now what it doesn't actually tell you is that it is also targeting just the paragraph element within that class. How do I know that? Well, if we go back to the content section here and say we turn this first statement into a headline, so we'll drop down onto the next line and we'll turn this most popular WordPress themes in the world into an H2, you'll see that immediately the H2 goes back to black, which tells us that this statement is only targeting the paragraph element within this block of text. And we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into actually writing your own CSS selectors a little bit later on in the tutorial. So meanwhile, what we'll now do is we'll duplicate this text box, and I'll drag this into the next column. And I'm then going to go into the settings for this text box, into the Advanced tab, and I'm going to delete the custom CSS. And immediately the text goes back to black. So the point that I'm making here is that CSS that you add at module level to individual modules only targets and affects that individual module. So it's a good way if you just want to change one thing in one module and you can't change that one thing by using something in the Design tab. Obviously you could have changed color by doing that, but there are certain things that you can only change by using custom CSS. And the reason that the CSS that we've written that is changing this color to red is not applying to this module, you can find if you go into main element and again click on the little question mark, and you'll see that this particular text box has been given a class of .et underscore pb underscore text underscore 1. If you remember, this text box ended in an _0, and for each text box that you add will be given a different class, and that class and any changes you make to the CSS for that class will only affect that individual module. So if you want to affect multiple modules with the CSS, you need to write your own selectors. You're not able to do that applying CSS in this way, so we need to look at one of the other ways that you can add CSS to Divi. So we'll do that now. So the first place that we can add CSS using our own selectors is at page level. So if we look at the settings for a page and we click on the Advanced tab, we again have a custom CSS area. But this time, if we hover, we won't see a little question mark, and there isn't a predefined selector for us. There is in a way in that this selector is applying to this entire page, but if we want to target this text block and we want to change some of the attributes of the text, we have to write our own selector. So for example, if we simply wrote color red in here, nothing would happen because we haven't given it a selector and Divi doesn't know where to apply that CSS. So instead we have to write a selector. Now if you remember from the previous example, we know that .et_pb_text_0 is the class that was attached to this first text module. If we now then insert a pair of braces, and we can now include our CSS definitions within the braces, and they will apply to this block. So the first thing I'm going to do is target the paragraph, and in order to do that we add a P into our selector, and then we can say color red, and here we are, same as in the other example, we have now succeeded in colouring the paragraph text red. The headline, which is an H2, hasn't been affected. Say we want to select the heading only and not the paragraph, we can come in here and we can change the selector to H2, and that will affect our heading. While we're in here, say we want to increase the line height, we can come in here and we can go line height, and we can add in a little bit more line height, so let's go with 1.5 ems, and that spaces out our headline a little bit. So we've used a bit of custom CSS, we've used our own selector, .et_pb_text_0, we've targeted the H2 element, we've changed its colour to red, and we've changed the line height to 1.5 ems. Now that's fine, but by using this selector, we are only targeting this particular text box. So if I were to close this, for example, and to duplicate this and to move this into the second column, you'll see that the styles have not been applied to this box. And the reason for that is that this is not ET_PB_text_0, this is ET_PB_text_1. So it's not going to take the styling that we applied to the ET_PB_text_0 element on our page CSS. Now this can get a bit complicated because as well as adding this class, Divi is actually adding a class of ET_PB_text without the 0 on the end. And if we were to change the selector to that, we would in fact target both text boxes, and for that matter we target any other text boxes on this page. But it's quite easy to get lost with knowing which selector you're using and what that's going to apply to, so there is actually a better way to do things, which we're going to have a look at now. So let's delete this CSS, close the box, save the page, and we'll have a look at the next method, which is using our own classes and IDs. So to do that, we're going to go into this first text box again, and we're going to go to the Advanced tab, and instead of adding any custom CS down here, we're going to give it a class of our own. So I'm going to call this my text. Okay, and I've added this at class level. The difference between IDs and classes is that an ID will apply to only one specific item that you attach the ID to. Think of it as an identity, so it's a one-off identity. And if you just want to target one thing on your site, then you can use an ID. A class, on the other hand, is pretty much exactly what it says. It's a class of objects. So all objects with the class myText will have the styling applied to them that I define for myText. Whereas if I defined it as myText as an ID, it would only apply to a single item, as you can't duplicate IDs. So I've gone in and I've added a class myText. Note there's no period or full stop in front of it, simply the words myText, and I'm going to close that box. I'm then going to go back into my page settings, back into the Advanced tab. I'm going to add my selector, so myText. I'm going to select the H2 element. I'm going to add a pair of curly braces, and I'm going to say color red. And you will see immediately that the text for the H2 element changes to red, and that's because it's targeting the myText class that I've added to this text box. Now I haven't added it to this text box, I've only added it to this one, which is why that's the only one to change colour. However, it's very simple now to go into this text box, the Advanced section, and as soon as I add the class, the changes take effect immediately. So effectively you can write some CSS, you can give it some class names that you understand, structure them in a way that you understand them, and then to apply those classes to particular modules, all you need to do is come in and add the myText class or whatever class you define to that module, and the CSS will be applied automatically. The nice thing now is that having applied that to those two, I can then go in again and I can edit that CSS. So say I change my mind and I think actually I want those headings to be purple, so I can come in here, change that to purple. Actually that doesn't show up particularly well, let's go with orange, and immediately both of those change to orange. And the nice thing is it wouldn't matter how many modules I had on this page, because in this particular example we're adding CSS at a page level. So if I had any number of text modules, so let's have a third one. Now this time if I duplicate a text module, because the class has been added to the text module, you'll find that actually that custom class comes when I duplicate and has been applied automatically to the module. Now I can come in here, I can have a look in the Advanced, and you'll see that my class of myText has been added to the module. If I delete it, then the styling immediately disappears, but obviously stays on the other two. So no matter how many modules that I apply to this page, and they don't have to be just text modules either, because I'm targeting anything with a class of myText, any module that I put on this page that has an H2 heading in it will be affected. So let's remove this CSS from here for now, and we'll look at the third way, in fact the third and fourth ways, because they are actually the same, that we can add CSS to our site. So far we've looked at adding CSS to individual sections, columns, rows and modules. We've looked at adding CSS at page level. So remember, the first way only affects the module that you add it to. This way affects all modules on the page that are given a particular class. And the final way is actually going to apply your CSS site-wide. So let's have a look at that now. The next place we're going to look at adding custom CSS is by going to the dashboard, to Divi and to theme options, and you'll find there is a space to add custom CSS in here. And we could type it in here. The downside of typing it in here is that we can't actually see immediately what's happening. We have to save and then go back to the page. So there's actually an easier way to do it, which is to go back to the page and to choose Theme Customizer. Now, any CSS that you add in the Theme Customizer will automatically be added to the Divi options area that we were just looking at. So if we go into additional CSS here, we can then use our same classes. So remember that we added a class. So remember that we added a class of myText to each of these paragraphs. So I can go in here and I can type myText. Now I want to be quite specific. Because of the way that specificity works in CSS, it's important to make your selector as specific as possible so that it overrides a selector with similar specificity that may be occurring before it in the CSS. Now that sounds a bit complicated, but basically if you have something less specific that turns up later, the normal rule in CSS is that the latest statement takes precedence, but if the earlier statement is more specific, then it will take precedence over the later statement unless you use the important tag, which you see people using all over the place. If you can avoid using important, it's a really good thing to do. Important is a tag of last resort, if you like, because once you've overridden something with an important tag, it can be really difficult to find out how that happened and how to override it in the future. So the best thing to do is to be as specific as you can when you're writing your selector. So in this example, although I've added my text class that I've added to each of these blocks, I also know that they each have an et underscore pb underscore text class attached to them. So by putting both classes in, I'm being specific and I'm targeting anything with both the .myText and the .etpb text classes attached to them. I can then come in and say I want to target the h2. I can type h2 and I want to increase the line spacing, so I can come in with line height and give it 1.5m, and that immediately improves the line height on my headline. Why not change it to red at the same time, so I can come in and go color red, and as you can see immediately the headlines in all three modules change to red because I've defined my CSS at this level and it's going to apply to the whole site. So in fact, if I publish this now and I go to my other page where I've also got a text module, you can see that as I have the same class, my text, applied to this text module as well, the CSS that I've just written automatically applies to it. So the next thing we can do with classes is that we can add multiple classes to a single module so that we can target them in a different way. So let's just have a look at why we might want to do that. We'll come back to the home page and let's say we want this central text module to be more emphatic. So let's make it a reverse out box. So we can go into the Visual Builder, we can go into this text module, we can go into the advanced column, and where we have my text, it's possible to add another class. So I'm going to add a class which I'm going to call reverse out. Now remember, when we're adding classes, we don't use the full stop or period, just simply the name of the class. So we have my text, we have a space, and we have another class called reverse out. And I've just added that to this middle module. I'm now going to save my changes. I'm going to go out of the Visual Builder into the customizer where I added my CSS, click on additional CSS, and I'm now going to target this center block. How am I going to do that? So I'm going to add all of my selectors now. So in fact, I can copy this bit from here and paste it in. So I've got .mytext.et.pb underscore text. Now I want to add a definition for my reverse out box. So I'm then going to add reverse out, and I can then add my definitions for just the reversed out version of the box. Now what I want to do is make the background black, so we'll come in here, we'll go with background and black, and you can see immediately that just the module that has the reverse out class and the other classes is given a background. Now it immediately then highlights another problem in that I didn't give any padding to this when I defined it, and it's fine on a white background, but as soon as you get a black background like that, it doesn't look very good. And the nice thing about adding CSS the way I've been doing it is that I can go back to my initial definition. So I can go back into my .mytext.et underscore pb underscore text, and I can add some padding. So padding 20 pixels, and that's added 20 pixels all round. Now this might seem like quite a cumbersome way of adding things when you can just add them at module level, but there are attributes that you can't add at module level, but it's actually very handy to be able to do it in one place and to change the whole site. So now that I've fixed the padding, I also need to do something about the color of this text. So I can come in here and I can target the paragraph. So once again, I want my classes, and then I'm going to target the paragraph by adding a P tag, and I'm going to say color white, and that changes the color of my text to white. So now that I've set up my class definitions, it's actually very easy to go in and decide where I want to apply them. As I say, it may seem like a cumbersome way of doing things, but once these are set up, it's really easy to style your site the way you want. So say a client comes back and said, you know what, I don't want this reversed out block in the middle. I'd like it to be on either side, and I'd like the block in the middle to be normal. So I can simply go into the Visual Builder. I can come into center block. I can remove my reverse out class, but leave the my text class. I can then come into this block and I can just add reverse out, and it immediately changes. And I can go into this box and I can add reverse out in here too, and I've made the change without having to go in and play with all of the modules. And because I've added the CSS where I have, we're not limited to a single page. So if I save that, exit the Visual Builder, we go to my other page, and I decide, do you know what, I'd like this box to be reversed out as well. I can go into the Builder, come into the module, to Advanced, and add reverse out, and I've immediately created a reversed out box complete with the padding and the text colors that I wanted. So that's the third and fourth way of adding CSS. So that is using the customizer and the Divi theme options, which effectively, as I say, do the same thing. The final way is by using a child theme. Now, do I or don't I use a child theme is a question that gets asked a lot. If you're going to be writing a lot of CSS and you want to keep it organized in one place and easy to follow, and by a lot, I think Elegant Themes say more than 100 lines or so, then it makes sense to put that CSS in a child theme. The way it behaves is no different, so let's just have a quick look at how we deal with that. So if we come out of this Visual Builder, we'll go into the customizer. I'm going to take this CSS that I've written and I'm actually going to cut it. You'll see when I publish that the stars actually go back to normal because I've removed the CSS. I'm going to exit the Visual Builder. I'm going to come to my dashboard. I'm going to come to Appearance, and I'm going to come into Theme Editor. Now, I've already got a child theme here. In fact, let's just have a quick look at that. So if we go into Themes, you can see that I've installed my Divi Coaching child theme. That's a free child theme, which I have available. If you follow the link in the description below, you can download and install it. So that is now my active theme. If I go into the theme editor, I come down to the bottom here. I've already got one or two styles for some other items, and I paste in the CSS that we've just written and click on Update File. We can now go back to the site, and we'll see that the CSS has been applied. So adding it into a child theme has the same effect as adding it in the customizer or in the Divi theme options area, but it allows you to keep it all in one place and to keep it under control. Now, we've really only just touched the surface of how to use CSS in Divi, but hopefully that's given you enough to get started. So just to recap, you can add it into sections, rows, columns and modules, in which case you don't have a choice of having your own selector. The selector is predetermined for you, and the CSS that you add will only affect the place that you add it. You can then add it at page level, in which case you do have to use a selector, and it will apply to any item that is defined by the selector that you include, but that is also on the page where you've added the CSS. Third and fourth, you can add the CSS in the customizer or the Divi options page, which are one and the same thing. So whatever CSS you add in the customizer will appear in Divi options and vice versa. And finally, you can add CSS in the child theme, which has the same effect as the last option, but is a good place to keep your CSS organized and tidy so it's easy to follow. Having said all of that, there is one final place that you can add CSS, and that is what is called inline CSS in a module. So if we have a look at my site here, you can see that I've colored the word WordPress blue within my heading, and I'll just show you how I do that, because that is the final way that you can use CSS. So this heading was actually built in the theme builder. So I'm going to go to the dashboard, I'm going to go to Divi, I'm going to go to the theme builder, I'm going to go into my global header. We're going to click on this text module, and you'll find that this is the visual version of the text. But if we go to this version of the text, which shows the code, you can see I've got an H4 tag, and I'm seeing build better. And then I've added a span tag with a style inside it. So open tag, span, style equals color, colon, blue, semicolon, close quotes, and then a close span tag. So this is just basic CSS, but this is called inline style. If I wanted to change the color of that to, say, green, it's as easy as that. I can just change the text in here. If I wanted the whole thing to be WordPress websites instead of just WordPress, I could move this close tag and I could pop it after the word websites. So basically that's what you do. You wrap the text that you want to change in a span tag, and within that span tag you do a style equals, and then you can open quotes and you can put your CSS selectors inside the quotes. And I can even put multiple style definitions in here as long as I separate them with a semicolon. So for example, let's put a semicolon in here, and I'm going to say text decoration colon underline, and you can see that that is immediately applied. So that's the final way of adding CSS. Again, I'm going to say the final way. You could probably also add it in a code block as well, but let's just stick with the 5 that we've defined. So I hope that's given you a better understanding of how you can use CSS in Divi. If you found this lesson helpful, please do hit the like button. And if you're not already a subscriber to my channel, please do consider subscribing. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.